December 7, 1941, Japan launches a surprise attack on the United States. Japanese aircraft destroy a good part of the American fleet anchored in Pearl Harbor. The U.S. Secret Service didn't even see the disaster coming. Worse, the FBI ignored warnings about the operation from a Soviet double agent. Worse, the FBI ignored warnings about the operation from a Soviet double agent. Shortly after moving into the White House, new President Harry Truman draws the lessons of the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor and creates the CIA. It's a clear rebuff for the FBI and its powerful director, J. Edgar Hoover, who loses all authority over strategic intelligence activities.
Oh, it's a horrible story. It started in 1940s. Harry Truman made a decision and told J. Edgar Hoover that he would not let J. Edgar Hoover handle foreign intelligence.
Harry Truman was not about to set up a CIA as part of the FBI or set up the CIA and FBI in one organization. To him, that sounded like the Gestapo or the KGB.
And Truman reluctantly approved the creation of the CIA, to everybody's everlasting regret.
Pittsburgh, January 1980. Dear Sir, early in 1942, only months after Pearl Harbor, I was invited by Congressman George Bender of Ohio to attend a special meeting of a select group of congressmen and government officials at the Army and Navy Club in Washington. This was an informal group that met bi-weekly to dine, talk freely on matters otherwise held confidential, and play poker. One of the group's members was the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover, who said that from early fall 1941 until a few days before the Japanese attack, they had had warnings that it was coming. Much more important, President Roosevelt had had warnings during all of that time from a number of sources, but he was very sure they were not passed on to General Marshall, nor General Short, nor Admiral Kimmel, the commanders in the Pacific. Hoover said the president told him not to mention to anyone any of this information, but leave it to be handled in his own judgment.
Communism in reality is not a political party. It is a way of life, an evil and malignant way of life. It reveals a condition akin to disease that spreads like an epidemic. And like an epidemic, a quarantine is necessary to keep it from infecting this nation.
Senator McCarthy had a very good relationship with Mr. Hoover, both socially and professionally.
I do think the committee should go into executive session and read this FBI report. You'll find, Mr. Chairman, that it states that an individual at the Signal Corps laboratory was in close touch with a Russian spy.
Prior to me going with the committee, the senator was in controversy with the CIA. And just days before I went there, he had asked for the subpoena of an official of CIA. And Allen Dulles refused.
The CIA as an institution came to abhor McCarthy because he accused the CIA of being subversive, which was insane. And the misuse of the Federal Bureau of Investigation is one of the great shames of American democracy. And Hoover fed these people like McCarthy.
I served in the FBI until 1953. And we tried to develop top functionaries within the Communist Party as informants for the FBI.
If you're old enough to remember Senator Joseph McCarthy, then you're surely old enough to remember Roy Cohn, then the 26-year-old chief counsel to the Wisconsin senator, who held hearings, some called them witch hunts, aimed, he said, at ridding the U.S. government of communists.
Roy Cohn, he was super smart and super manipulative and super out for himself.
I think that Senator McCarthy was, in many ways, dependent on Roy because he did not have the sources of information that Roy had, and also that kind of taking the leadership role, if you will, of what we would investigate and how we would investigate. Roy was the man behind the throne, so to speak.
I knew that we were advised about Pearl Harbor several days before the attack on Pearl Harbor, yet it was supposed to be a surprise attack. I talked to the naval intelligence officer who received the message in Washington, D.C. on December the 4th, 1941, that the Japanese were going to attack Pearl Harbor. He sent the message on to his superiors. After the war, he was subpoenaed before a committee, congressional committee. He was told by his superiors at that time, ignore the subpoena. You don't understand now, but you will later on. As we all know, and as well documented, we knew in advance of Pearl Harbor. It was covered up.
Shivers called me in one day, about a week before the war started. Closed the doors and says, I'm not telling my men this, but I'm telling you. We're going to be attacked before a week is out. And the guy had tears in his eyes.
Now, I'm a little bit lost here. Shivers being the FBI man here?
Robert L. Shivers, head of the FBI, SAC, senior agent in charge.
Mm-hmm.
We'd be away.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Which caused my mind afterwards to wonder, why you're on attack defense all week, and Saturday you go on sabotage alert.
New York values were on display for all to see in the aftermath of 9/11. A strike at the heart of our city and our nation, and in fact, even the world. This was the worst hit that our country has ever taken, worse than Pearl Harbor, because when they attacked Pearl Harbor, at least it was military. This was civilians. These were great people. Everybody in this room practically knew somebody that died or somebody that was horribly injured during that terrible day. But this was an attack on civilians, and this was the worst attack in the history of our country. And when you think of what we've done since then and how we've reacted, that's New York values, folks. That's New York values.